In today's video, we are going to be building 3 different types of mushroom beds, and we're also going to be using 3 different types of cultivars. From the easiest to hardest, we have the blue oyster mushrooms. These can pretty much grow on anything, anywhere. Then we have my favorite, the wine cap mushroom, also quite easy. And then the last one is new to me, the bluet mushroom. Apparently grows in a wide part of the Pacific Northwest and is quite tasty, so I figured let's try it. Now, the 3 methods we are going to be doing today is inoculating all of our garden pathways. So we get fruiting beds inside the pathways that are usually useless. We're also going to build a big in-ground bed, which is something I've done before. And then the final one is something new to me as well, which is building mushroom containers. So let's get started with the pathways right over here. We're gonna get started over here with the wine cap mushrooms. Now, a couple interesting things about the wine caps is that they're extremely easy to identify. There's actually almost nothing that looks like them. So you have basically 0 chance of eating the wrong mushroom and getting sick from doing so. So that's one of the reasons why it's so popular in the garden. Another is that it's actually called King of the Garden mushroom because it grows so well in home gardens. In particular, it does really well in pathways. Now, usually things like our garden pathways are just wasted space allowing us to access our garden, but these guys will actually turn our mulch in the pathways into food for us to eat and break down the soil and the mulch to make it even better for your garden in general. So what I did right now is I just got the base layer of wood chips wet here. This is Douglas fir. It's a mixture of wood and bark, which is good because it gives it more options to colonize. Now, things like Douglas fir are a conifer, which can be a challenge for a lot of mushrooms, but as far as I understand, wine caps don't really care. They can handle quite a lot. But just to make sure we're good, we are actually going to be using straw as well. Now, this is just a bale of straw I just picked up today, and all I did beforehand is just soak it in some water. The idea behind this is that I get the straw really nice and saturated, making it easier for the mushrooms to colonize. So I'm gonna start with a layer of this wet straw. I'm just gonna go all the way down the pathway here. Every time I put a layer of substance down, I'm going to water it in. The idea behind this is that it gets it nice and wet, but it also actually helps mat it down to make a nice tight layer. So we have our base straw layer down. We have the wood chips at the bottom. Now let's go ahead and sprinkle some of the spawn on. So I got all this spawn from North Spore, all 3 of them. I've used them before and they've always worked quite well. And that's why I went with it this time as well. Always happy results, and you always get exactly what you're expecting. There's 2 different types of spawn that you can usually get. There's grain and there's sawdust spawn. I believe that this is a sawdust spawn. And what you see is all that white stuff. That is the mycelium that is spreading through the block. Those are the colonies of mushrooms that we are now going to crumble into the garden to propagate these mushrooms across this entire space. So what I'm going to do now that I have the wood chips and the wet straw is I'm going to crumble it up pretty finely. I'm just going to sprinkle it over the top. It's like you're seasoning the straw with that mushroom. Don't be afraid to break it up pretty finely because you don't need that much to spread it. The idea behind using straw here is that straw you could think of as like a sugar. It's something that the mushrooms will consume, colonize very quickly, spread throughout it, especially when it's wet. It's very easy for them to take over on a straw product. Now, the wood chips are like your proteins and your fats. Those are going to take longer for the mushrooms to colonize, to consume, to digest, and create mushrooms. So by mixing the 2 together, you get a nice blend of something that spreads them quickly and then something that feeds them a long time. You can just use entirely straw. And if you do that, your mushrooms will produce faster, but then they'll probably only produce a single time. By adding a little bit of wood in, you're ensuring that you're gonna get mushrooms for a long period of time instead of just a little flash of it in the pan. So now we got the spawn down, and I'm going to add another layer of wood chips on top of that. And we're gonna just keep layering until you basically run out of spawn, or you wanna just move on to another area. There are some measurements for how much space this kind of bag can actually spread across, but I'm just gonna eyeball it here and just use as much as I feel like I need. Now we're gonna water it again, and now we come back in with another layer of straw. As I'm building these beds, I am stomping on it because I wanna try to get rid of as many of the air pockets as I can, just to make sure I have good mushroom contact with all the substrate. This is gonna be the final layer that I put on. I'm gonna go directly onto the wood chips this time and then top it with straw, and that'll be it. I'm gonna save a little bit of this so I could do a grow bag setup because I wanna try that with the wine caps for sure. But after that, let's move on to the bluet mushroom bed. A couple of caveats: if you live somewhere that is a little bit wetter, a little bit cooler, you don't have to bother piling it up the way I did. You could just sprinkle some spawn on your pathways and pile some more wood chips on and let the rain and cool weather spread it through your garden. Here in a desert climate, I needed to provide a little bit of buffer by building a proper bed in the pathway. But now that I have, as I get into this rainy season, I'm hoping that from this patch, it'll actually spread throughout the rest of my pathways. It's now been 3 weeks since we built this mushroom bed, and I want to take a peek at it to see if what we did actually worked. If it worked, what we'll notice is that the material that we placed here will kind of be bound together, and that's due to the spread of mycelium thread. That is the actual mushroom spore taking hold of this carbon material so it could propagate, spread throughout it, and then get ready to fruit and create mushrooms for us to eat. So let's take a peek underneath. I actually haven't looked at this side at all before. I have looked at the other side. And what I'll hope to see is that if I come here and pick this up, it'll start working as a clump instead of individual straw like the surface stuff. The surface stuff I'm not too surprised by because it is on the surface and it dries out a little bit more. But down here, what I see is some beautiful, beautiful mycelium threads all throughout. So what I'm looking at, I'll come bring some for you guys to look at, is a bunch of very, very fine white sort of hair-like material. This is the actual mycelium spreading throughout all of this organic matter. So if you take a look at these wood chips, like right here, it's covered in all that little white fuzz. That's all the mycelium successfully spreading. So we know this is working for a fact because we originally sprinkled all the spawn, which was attached to grain, onto this bed, and now it's in and on the wood chips and straw. So it has actually jumped from that original sort of carrier into the material that we want it to go into. The other thing I'm curious to take a look at is to see if it's starting to spread past the boundary here. And oh boy, it is. Right here, I just hit a mother load of mycelium threads. That is amazing, because once the rainy season starts here in about a month or maybe even soon, all this wood chip and mulch across this entire part of the garden is going to get wet, get saturated, and this mycelium thread is going to sense that moisture, sense all this fresh material just sitting here, and hopefully spread throughout my entire garden. And then maybe in the springtime, I'll start seeing little wine cap mushrooms popping up all over the garden. So this is fantastic news. I'm very, very happy to see that this is working. It's spreading, successful inoculation. Now we just have to wait for the fruiting window. Make sure you guys stick around till the end of the video where I show you how to grow mushrooms inside a container or grow bag just like this. And in just 3 weeks, I already got the first mushrooms coming out. So oyster mushrooms, wine cap mushrooms are great for beginners because they grow very quickly, they're easy to identify, and they're also delicious. I also want to take a quick moment to thank the sponsor of today's video, which is North Spore mushroom. That is where I got all the spawn that I used in this video. I've been getting spawn from them for now about 2 years, and I've always had great success, whether it's on the indoor kits like growing shiitake mushrooms on my kitchen counter, or on these outdoor growing kits like oyster mushrooms and wine cap mushrooms, which are so delicious, especially when you grow them outside. I feel like they pick up a little extra terroir flavor. So check them out. We have a code for you guys. It's Hermit, HERMIT, gives you 10% off, and full disclosure, I get a 10% commission if you use that code. So thank you, North Spore, for providing such great spawn and for making it easy to grow mushrooms at home. Now, let's move on to building the next bed, which is a little bit more intermediate, but you'll probably find it very interesting. The next mushroom is going to be the bluet mushroom. It's very similar to the last one we built, but the composition of the bed is going to be a little bit more complex. These guys can apparently consume a very wide range of materials, including just like agricultural waste, unfinished compost. So we're going to be mixing all that in. And the thing that's interesting about them is that they take longer to fruit than the other mushrooms I'm growing, and they need a cold weather period in order to fruit. So if they fruit at all here in San Diego, it'll definitely be after January. So one of the things that's interesting to me is that it says that they can consume corn stalks. So I have been leaving this corn here to dry, but at this point, I gotta use some of this because I'm so curious to see what the corn looks like after it's been consumed. So what I'm going to do is cut out 2 rows of corn right here and then chop it up, and that'll be the base of our mushroom bed. So I'm gonna get chopping, and I might be pulling a couple extra ears off that I've been drying and setting them in this basket. Just to make the consumption of this material a little bit easier, I'm gonna go ahead and cut each one of these corn stalks into like 3 or 4 pieces. I'll spread it out, and then we'll start building the rest of this mushroom bed. Like I said, the bluet mushrooms can actually consume compost. So what I'm going to do here is take some of my not finished compost. This is my finished bin, this is my unfinished bin. So I'm gonna just go ahead and grab some of it. This is a straw-based compost. So it's actually gonna be somewhat similar, but it should provide a little bit more varied nutrients in there, just from all the random stuff that hasn't fully broken down. Like right here, I have a bunch of marjoram and yarrow that I just cut back. So we'll just go ahead and throw that in and just cycle all this nutrients back into my mushrooms. We have the base of the bed built with the chopped up corn stalks, and now I'm kind of debating how I want to get it started. I think what I'll do is actually take some of this unfinished compost and just sprinkle that in. And the idea behind using this first is that it'll help fill in some of the gaps between the corn. So I don't want air pockets. Generally speaking, having a bunch of empty air pockets is probably going to lead to a worse result when it comes to growing mushrooms, just because they need that full contact with the substrate in order to colonize it. So let's go ahead and spread some of this out, just like so. Water it again, just to settle all this material down. In my mind, I feel like the best way to sprinkle your medium onto your bed is to use the wet straw, because the wet straw is going to guarantee provide a good contact with your mushroom spawn. Whereas anything else like the wood chips or this kind of material here, it's going to be quite chunky. So I'm just more worried about getting air gaps when I use something like this. So let's just go ahead and throw down a layer of wet straw. Every time I put a new layer on, I am going to add a little bit of water just to help it settle. Now this stuff smells a little bit different. I don't know how to describe the way this smells, but it is interesting. And there does seem to be a little bit less of the mycelium throughout, but it could just be the function of the mushroom. I definitely see some white threads, but since I see less overall compared to the other spawn, I'm gonna go ahead and apply this a little bit thicker and probably just do 2 layers instead of 3. Just want to make sure that at the very least, instead of doing multiple layers where nothing takes, I'd rather have 2 really well established layers. And then I'm gonna do some compaction. Just for fun, because I have it, I'm going to use this compost. I just think like, it just seems like an interesting thing to be able to grow your mushrooms in your compost. And honestly, it makes sense. Mushrooms are really good at decomposing. So some semi-broken down material like this should provide it all the things it needs to produce mushrooms. Just using the hose without any sprayer, just so I can get a lot of pressure, because I want to work all this fine material into all the pores. Definitely, I always recommend pre-soaking your straw if you're going to build any sort of mushroom bed. It's just going to guarantee that everything is really nice and wet, and you don't have to worry as much about watering it in. So I'm gonna go ahead, take whatever's left here of the spawn, and just spread it out across this. Really, really interesting smell. I really don't know how to describe it. So the final step I'm gonna do here is actually just blanket the entire bed in this wood chips, and that's it. This is going to act as a sort of insulation blanket at the end here, keep it from getting too hot, lock in all that moisture. One thing I want to mention is that this looks like you're essentially wasting a lot of material. The cool thing about mushrooms is that you will take all of the stuff that I just threw on here, eat it all up, and turn it into a wonderfully rich compost that I could then spread across my garden. So even if I don't get fruiting mushrooms, it'll still break down all this material, and I'll be able to actually just turn this back into fertility across my entire garden. So that's a nice little side bonus. But let's go build out some containers to grow mushrooms in if you don't have as much space for the boat, like something like that. Here we are at the Bluet mushroom bed, where honestly, I can't see a lot of activity, but I'm also not terribly surprised. This is a mushroom that takes up to a year before it even has the chance of fruiting, and it requires a cold period in order to do so. So I think it needs that little cold period in order to also activate and spread throughout all this material here. So we'll check back on this after December. I'll be sure to update you guys in other videos, but for now, activity is low, but the aroma of mushroom is still there. So I do believe that it is still in there. It's just going a lot slower. This next method, I'm not sure if I've seen anyone do it exactly like this. Usually people are extremely cautious and sterilize everything, but I am using oyster mushrooms here, and oyster mushrooms are hard to mix identifications with any other mushroom. So I'm not too worried if this doesn't work, it just won't work. Nothing really bad should happen. But full disclaimer, do whatever you want when it comes to mushrooms. It's up to you to identify them. So I am going to add in a bonus tip, actually, how to get more mushrooms out of this, using it directly in the garden without doing any of the weird stuff that we've done so far. So definitely check that out after I finish setting up this container. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just crush up this entire block while it's in the bag. I don't know why I never thought to do this before, but it definitely seems easier. So these are blue oyster mushrooms, but let's just get started with some straw. Now I have decided to use the lined grow bags that we just started carrying, because this should help keep the entire system more moist. And using the grow bag to me just kind of sounds like fun. I don't know why I'm so compelled to try this, but I just really want to see if you could get away with growing mushrooms in a grow bag. So all I'm doing right now is this straw is wet, but it is not soaking. It's been drained, so it's not like sopping wet. It's just entirely damp. So there's what the bottom layer looks like, a nice even layer of straw. We're gonna get some of this spun, and we're gonna just crinkle it right in there. And actually, what I'm going to do is also sort of blend it in a little bit. This next layer, I have decided I will be adding a couple of these wood chips in here. These are actually a mix of some of the wood chips I used earlier and a couple pieces of hickory that I use for smoking, just because hickory is a nice hard wood. This should help the spawn last a little bit longer in theory. Take that nice little chunk of spawn, make our layered cake, and more straw. So we're near the top here. I'm gonna go ahead and grab another little chunk of spawn, sprinkle that in, and blend it in a teeny bit here. Now, one thing I haven't decided yet is whether I want to cut holes into the side of the bag. So what I'm going to do instead, just to keep a good monitor on this, is I'm gonna cap it off with one final layer of straw, just to lock all that in. And then I'm actually going to take a nice little piece of craftwork that I made here, which is the cardboard box that the mushroom spawn shipped in, cut it into a almost circle-like shape. I'm just gonna go ahead and put that on as a cap. So it's pretty tight fitting, which is good. And what I'm gonna do here, cut a couple X's into the straw. The idea here, or into the cardboard, sorry, is that if the mushrooms are ready to actually fruit, hopefully they'll come out through these little holes that I'm cutting into the cardboard. And that'll be my sign that it is fruiting. And if I decide to, I can then cut some holes into the side of the bag to get a couple extra fruiting sessions out of it. So there we go. No idea if this is going to work well or work at all. But again, worst case scenario, I guarantee the mycelium will definitely colonize the straw. It'll at the very least break it down. If it doesn't grow out of here, the spawn will continue to propagate in here, and I could just sprinkle this in other parts of my garden. Now, I did mention a bonus use for the rest of this spawn that I have over here. So let's go apply that in the garden. And this is actually probably the easiest possible way you could use your spawn, and probably should have started with it, but let's go ahead and do it now. Forgot to tell you guys how to actually take care of this. So a couple things right off the bat is that you're going to want to take it, put it somewhere that gets dappled light at the most. The mushrooms will eventually want some amount of light in order to produce vitamin D and to produce a really nice flush. The other thing that you want to know is not to overwater it. So what I'm going to do is just take my finger, poke it into the straw. Obviously it still feels moist, and that's all you need to do. If you overwater it, it can get moldy. You don't want to grow mold, you want to grow mushrooms. So make sure you don't overwater it. Keep it in some spotty sort of shade and sun, and just water it occasionally. When it comes to oyster mushrooms in this kind of setup, it should actually produce in as little as 4 to 5 weeks. As I mentioned, this last tip is by far the easiest, and it's probably something you already have set up in your garden, which is just find your raised beds that have some nice mulch on there, especially if it's fresh. Just take a little bit of your spawn, sprinkle it all around. I did get this wet before I did this, just to make sure that I had some good contact. But the idea behind this is that even just sprinkling a little bit of spawn right on top of your straw, or even if you have wood mulch, it will actually colonize, and there's a very good chance you'll get mushrooms, especially with the oyster mushrooms, because they seem to be the most forgiving of all mushroom species that I've ever grown. I actually did this last year and got a couple of fruitings out of my raised bed. So just a nice little bonus. Now, of course, you can just grow your mushrooms directly in these bags if you so choose to do. But this way, by spreading it across multiple different areas like grow bags or in your garden beds, you just get so much more spawn out of that bag. Like right now, I still have a whole third of this bag left. I could start inoculating the rest of my raised garden beds, but that's pretty much all there is to it. Most of these mushrooms should fruit within 6 months. I've had wine caps fruit in as little as 3 months before, and oyster mushrooms, I think, fruit within 2 months. So we'll definitely do some checkups later and see how many of these beds actually worked. But if you want to see my previous mushroom videos where I grew some and ate some mushrooms, I'll have that linked right here. Until then, I'll see you next time.